Oh.
In the meantime, I'd like to call attention to the rules of decorum, the assembly rules of decorum, which are on the table by the door and posted on the door as well. Austin, can you hear us? Doing a sound check.
Ms. Davidson, are you able to hear us? Yes, I can. Thank you. Might be. Yeah. Just let me know when you're ready. Oh, that's a nice picture. This is right.
I like the color of the butters.
It is strangely quiet.
It is strangely quiet.
Welcome, everybody. I would like to call to order this joint meeting of the Anchorage Assembly and the Anchorage School Board. It is Friday, September 10, 2021. We are noticed from 10 a.m. to noon today. We'll go ahead and get started with the roll. Madam Clerk? Here.
Vice Chair Constance.
Here.
Ms. Allard.
Here.
Mr. Dunbar.
Here.
Ms. Kennedy. Mr. Presbydia.
Here.
Mr. Peterson.
Present.
Ms. Davidson. Here. Mr. Rivera.
Present.
Mr. Weddleton.
Here.
Ms. Volatel. Here. Thank you. You have a forum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Ms. Grant, would you call the roll for the members of the school board?
Certainly. President Bellamy.
Here.
Vice President Holloman.
Here.
Mr. Donnelly.
Here.
Mr. Higgins. Mr. Jacobs.
Present.
Ms. Lessons.
Here.
And Ms. Wilson.
Present.
Thank you, Ms. Grant.
Ms. Lessons, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I
I
pledge
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A land acknowledgement is a formal statement recognizing the indigenous people of a place. It is a public gesture of appreciation for the past and present indigenous stewardship of the lands that we now occupy. It is an actionable statement that marks our collective movement toward decolonization and equity. The Anchorage Assembly and Anchorage School Board would like to acknowledge that we gather today on the traditional lands of the Dena'ina Athabascans. For thousands of years, the Dena'ina have been and continue to be stewards of this land. It is with gratefulness and respect that we recognize the contributions, innovations, and contemporary perspectives of the Upper Cook Inlet Dena'ina.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Before we move on in our agenda, I just want to note that the Assembly Rules of Decorum are posted on the door, and copies are available on the table by the door as well. And I want to also remind folks, particularly when we begin the audience participation part of the meeting, no personal attacks, please. Large banners and flyers are not allowed. Please keep your signs to 8.5 by 11 in size, and disturbances are also not allowed. Given that there are a variety of avenues to express views during meetings, please no disruptions of our business today. And I ask that you refrain from, per the rules, clapping, cheering, booing, gesturing. At certain times, clapping is allowed and encouraged for resolutions or when we get, to a part of the meeting, and we can say that as well. Okay, so first of all, there are minutes of the previous joint meeting from June 7, 2021. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Moved and seconded, asking for unanimous consent. Madam Clerk, can I do that since there are two different bodies here? I feel like it's been a while since we've met, but it's only been since June.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I was out troubleshooting the IT situation. What was the question?
I just wanted to confirm we can just do unanimous consent to the approval of the
Yes,
minutes.
Madam Chair, absolutely.
Thank you. Seeing no objection, the minutes from June 7, 2021 are approved. Next, we have approval of the agenda. And copies are available by the door. Are there any changes? Mr. Donnelly?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move to add the venue of future meetings to the agenda.
As an item F of mutual concern or future venues for meetings?
I have an additional one that I think I wanted.
Mr. Donnelly, did you want to add another item now?
Madam Chair, I move to also add a report from the Assembly regarding the reinstitution of the bank ban.
And this is under an item of mutual concern?
Public.
Would someone mind repeating what Mr. Donnelly said? We can't hear on the phone.
Sure. And Ms. Quinn Davidson, can you hear me through the microphone?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So Mr. Donnelly has proposed adding 2 items to the agenda under 8 other matters of mutual concern. It would be, the first one would be F, other future venues for joint meetings. And then an item G, a request for a report from the Assembly regarding the bag ban.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Is there any discussion regarding these 2 items, adding these 2 items to the agenda? Is there any opposition to adding these items to the agenda? Seeing no opposition, these 2 items have been added to the agenda. Any other changes to the agenda? Any opposition to then approving the agenda as amended? Seeing no opposition, we have the agenda approved with those 2 items from Mr. Donnelly added. So now we'll go to initial audience participation. Mr. Constance?
So for the purposes of precedent and understanding, traditionally speaking, the assembly does not include initial audience participation in its agendas. The clerk did incidentally publish it there, and so we will have initial audience participation limited to 10 minutes. However, in the future, this will not be there. It's not precedential. The audience participation will stay after we've conducted our business for future meetings.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. So now we will move into initial audience participation. We'll take about 10 or 15 minutes for that because we've only got 2 hours scheduled for today. And we do have audience participation scheduled for the end of the meeting. And so we like to reserve, at least at assembly meetings, for the first part for folks who can't stay till the end or may have some other constraint that prevents them from participating at the end of the meeting. So folks who are interested in participating, please come forward and you will have 3 minutes. I want to remind everyone, no personal attacks, and please refrain from creating any disturbances. So please state your name for the record. Welcome.
We have a microphone.
Sure.
Hello, my name is Dustin Darden, and my name is spelled DUSTINDARDEN, and I'm here for this brief time of public testimony to say a prayer over our municipality of Anchorage and peace and love. So, Lord Jesus, I come to you today in this time of darkness, Lord God. I believe that you do have a plan for Anchorage, Alaska, and it's nothing that we can do apart from your intervention, Lord God. I lift up the hearts and minds of the people of Anchorage, Alaska, that you minister to them today on a level of their understanding, to show them what it is the enemy truly comes to do, which is to kill, steal, and destroy. Lord God, I thank you for conquering death, hell, and the grave on the cross of Calvary and defeating the father of lies, that one who comes around and he roams about as a deceiving, roaring lion, seeking who he may devour. Lord God, I declare and decree victory in the land of Anchorage, Alaska, that every dark thing be exposed, that every wicked crack be exposed by the marvelous gospel of Jesus Christ, that the Holy Spirit pour out on all flesh, and you do great exploits amongst the wicked, and that Anchorage be a place of righteous decrees. And with that being said, I would like to give you some thank you notes for the men and women. Is Mrs. Katie Grant here today, the assistant of the school board? Mrs. Katie Grant, I'd like to give you these congratulatory notes to pass out to your administration. That would include every member of the Anchorage school board, Dina Bishop, and Executive Director Tom Roth. These are arrest notes, and it's just a paper. You're just being arrested by a citizen for violating simple constitutional laws on the books. And that's how we do it here in United States of America. So God bless you and God bless America. And I also wanted to make furthermore a note that the injections that you are perpetrating on the people, do not get the injection if you're listening to this transmission. It is a DARPA-approved patented bioweapon, and the masks are a medical device that reduce the airflow into the body and also into bacterial pneumonia. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Darden. Hi, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Good morning to everybody. I'm not sure how the work sessions work, so I have questions about transportation and,
Ma'am, sorry to stop you. Could you state your name for the record? And
yes,
could you go ahead and use the microphone, please?
yikes. Okay, my name is Jennifer Roberts, and you want me to spell it? JENNIFER ROBERTS. I'm sorry. What else did you ask me?
You're good.
Okay, awesome. My question is about transportation and the priority and criteria. I'm not sure how to approach this, but my child's transportation was suspended or moved, and so I'm asking for something that shows the priority and criteria when they decide to reroute or suspend the driver of particular routes. We are located between Birch and Elmore, and there is no pedestrian infrastructure in place in that area, which means it's only automobile. So we're located within a mile of the schools, but it's that entire neighborhood in between those areas. And so when they choose their criteria, if it's based on, in fact, high ridership, they need to consider the zoning, which is R6, which is 1 acre lots. And if they're going off of the number of riders on a particular route and they use last year's data, there was no in-person schooling last year. So there's no, obviously, as you peel the onion back, there's no one was riding the bus. So I'm just asking if they can put something in writing that determines the priority when they start suspending routes and giving them to other areas. We pay property taxes, and Huffman may not be a city in the city grid, but we still have a chance to go to school and participate. So if my kid can't get to school because there's no bus pickup and it's a privilege, I'm stuck with taxis and Ubers and carpooling, and those aren't background checked or safe, and you don't know what goes on. So I'm just asking for some help with this. I hope I spoke clearly. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Roberts. I've got a member question for you, Mr. Constance.
Yeah, could you just say what school you were talking about?
It's Huffman, and South is not affected yet, but it is a rolling matrix or complex matrix where they take drivers from certain routes to accommodate other routes.
Huffman Elementary.
That is correct. But this particular area between the subdivisions on Huffman between Birch and Elmore have no pedestrian infrastructure. There's no safe route, according to the Department of Transportation. So when the snow blows or falls, there's nobody to plow anything except the main road. Thank you.
Ms. Roberts, Mr. Donnelly has a question for you.
Thanks,
Mr.
ma'am.
Donnelly?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Roberts, after we talked last week, I brought up some questions at the last school board meeting. Did you have a chance to hear the answers to those?
No, I did not.
Are you still under the impression that it's only going to be a 3-week rotation? Did you think it was longer than 3 weeks?
Given the COVID and winter surge, I'm very concerned that the driver shortage is going to continue to be an issue. So I want to say, hey guys, show me something when transportation decides the priority of, okay, we look at the number of riders, IEPs, American with Disabilities, that type of thing, that it shows if there's absolutely no infrastructure in place for the child to get to school and the buses are considered a privilege. Not everybody drives, not everybody has a car. By choice, I'm a stay-at-home mom. And so this year has been tough. Can you put gas in the car? Do you have auto insurance, et cetera, et cetera? Those are factors. And
I think it's a reasonable request. I just wanted to make sure you know it's not going to be, when we talked, I got the impression you thought it was going to be like 6 weeks or 8 weeks, but it's only going to be 3 weeks in one location and rotate to 3 weeks someplace else. And they did announce some criteria at that meeting. Title I school areas was one of the primary ones, and I realize you're not in the Title I school area.
well, how do they?
And no special education students would be impacted.
Oh, okay. So how do they prioritize people that have sidewalks and bike paths over when you look up the hill and there's no bike path or sidewalk?
We're going to give.
I'm sorry.
Thank you,
Okay,
ma'am.
thank you very much.
Okay. Welcome, Mr. Haberman.
Is this working? Okay. My name is Eugene Carl Haveman. I represent myself. Follow the public process. When the public process done appropriately, decision made by the governing body is more like the public interest. Some time ago, meetings of the Anchorage Assembly were on Tuesday nights, and school board meetings were different nights. So the public could have an opportunity to attend school board meetings or assembly meetings and not have this choice. But the result has changed, and I brought it up prior to that being enacted, and it's been a complicated situation because the public's not connected with the school board or assembly because of that choice. Recently, some school board members have told me that they agree, in essence, that there is a problem with this conflict, and I hope that this changes effectively as soon as possible. Second is the school board. I notice your packets and information that goes out to the public doesn't go back. You have a meeting on Tuesday night, but it doesn't go out until like the morning of Saturday. And then most recent weekend, we had Labor Day on Monday, and certainly that doesn't connect with the public to say, oh, wow, I want to connect with somebody, and the earliest possible they can connect with somebody by phone during the weekday would have been Tuesday, the same day as the school board meeting. And that's not very good. Third thing I would like to say is this. School board meetings are held in the regular place, and I have no problem with where they're held. And the assembly meetings are known to be in Lusac Library and Assembly Chambers, which was planned since the day Lusac Library was built. The assembly has seen it fit to have it differently, and most recently, 2 special meetings of the assembly, one dealing with the recall, deciding what day the recall of Zalatel was held downstairs in City Hall in 155. Now, these rooms that have been selected outside of these 2 rooms I noted are not fit for public meetings. They weren't fit before COVID. They're certainly not fit for during COVID. And with all due respect, look what's happened. 1 microphone here that we all have to share. And was noticed quickly that board member Dunley, there was difficulty of hearing what he was saying. Where was the mic for him? But where's the mic for everybody? So we really have a simple solution, and it can be rectified. But unfortunately, I fear it's going to be ignored. Thank you very much, with all the respect, and that leaves with 13 seconds to spare.
Thank you, Mr. Haberman. We will take one more, and we'll go to the phone. Madam Clerk, could we get Mr. Kendall on the line?
You should be on the line.
Mr. Kendall?
Hello? Yes, hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Would you go ahead?
It's my first time to do a phone thing, and I'm not sure I'm in favor of this.
And could you speak up
I'm
a
not
bit,
trying
Mr.
to
Kendall?
can you hear me okay?
Yes, and please identify yourself for the record.
Yes, my name is Paul, middle initial D as in Delta, Kendall, Kendall. I have no conflict of interest, know that I might have to be injurious by my testimony as opposed to benefit to me. I'm not a public employee union member, but I do support the union. I'm not a public employee union, though that's communism. I'm not sure I know where to start because there are so many things now that seem to be in a state of aberration. The first thing is that a 3-minute comment period is an egregious assault on the person that attempts to communicate. It used to be 5 to 7. We really need to open up to 5 to 10 minutes. You cannot construct a cohesive, gentle, harmonic commentary in such a short time frame. The other thing is that I'm witnessing when you open up a meeting, you threaten my fellow citizens. You intimidate them by innuendo, by verbiage constructs. The Supreme Court allows us to say what we want. We may be caustic and vehement, but that's our right to do that. And by you repressing my people, I'm seeing censorship the like which I've never seen in my lifetime. The school board meeting has one of the most, the school district has one of the most sophisticated camera media rooms in the state. And yet they cut off the face of the people so we can't observe them. That's how we observe their character, their content, their capacity, their commitment. They also shut for ability to see the public, which is our right to see. and we need to see at the same time. There's so many things that need to be addressed. I don't know where to begin. So here's what we need to do. Oh, one more thing. I've lost total faith in the security of our voting process and what's located in the systems like the many we're using. We all need to gather together now, set that system in an isolated side to side, and come up where we can all participate in our voting in a truthful manner beyond suspicion. And here's the final thing we need to do, ladies and gentlemen, because this time limit is so restricted, so precious, so censored up. You need to dedicate the Marston Theater to us as a people's place and platform. We need to be outside of those of you who would construct the meeting, who would threaten us, who would intimidate us, eliminate us in our ability to communicate. The reason we're having this problem is that most of your business is mundane, it's repetitive. That's what running the city is really all about. But these problems are becoming so complex and interwoven that we can't have intelligent discussion. And these moments like I'm spending here, these are really not the time and place because you're really geared towards repetitive, mundane business. So by taking the Marston Theater and dedicating it to us, we can have extended meetings all day, all week. We can develop our own protocols, our whiteboards, our electronic communication, and you can watch us as we give each other the attitude we need to be able to be engaging, challenging, interrogating, probing, inquisitorial.
Thank you, Mr. Kendall. Mr. Kendall,
I'm trying very.
would you wrap up, please? Your time is up.
I'm trying very hard to fit into a society that looks to me as if it's devolving.
Thank you, Mr. Kendall. That concludes our initial audience participation. And again, there will be final audience participation at the end. We're now on item 5, financial planning. We don't have anything for this item, so we'll move on to number 6, capital improvement needs. We don't have anything here as well. Number 7, comprehensive plan, land use matters. We don't have any items listed under this one either, so that brings us to number 8, other matters of mutual concern. The first item A, transportation services, suspension of some bus services. ASD is presenting.
Yes, that's good. Thank you. I'd like to request that Chief Operations Officer, Tom Roth, do that update. He'll come forward with the microphone. Here's the microphone.
Through the chair. So due to a shortage of commercial licensed drivers, the Anchorage School District, starting 30 August, has temporarily suspended bus service on a very finite number of routes. And just to very briefly discuss the system. So our system is to establish cohorts. We have 4 cohorts established, each cohort being suspended for up to 3 weeks. So each cohort is comprised of either 6 bus routes or 5 bus routes, cohort 3 and cohort 4. The criteria, some of which was discussed previously. So this was a collaborative effort. It was not a unilateral decision by student transportation. But the routes that have been identified for temporary suspension are based on.
Could you bring the microphone a little bit closer?
Yes, ma'am. So the criteria for closure is based on several factors. The first being that any special education bus is not impacted at all. Also, if a route supported a Title I school, that those routes were not considered for suspension. What that infers primarily is that those routes identified, generally speaking, went into more affluent areas of the municipality, primarily in South Anchorage and up in the Eagle River Chugiak area. Another criteria that was factored was ridership, not from the last year, but just historical ridership in current numbers that the district is providing transportation to students. So again, as mentioned, this is a 3-week suspension per cohort. So this current cohort that is suspended, that will end on the 17th of September. And then the system is intended, if we need to sustain it, the intent is that no bus route will be suspended a second time. We acknowledge that it is impactful, even though it's generally impacting those areas that do have more affluent families. We acknowledge, we understand that it is impactful. So I'm happy at this point to entertain any questions or comments.
Thank you. First, we have Mr. Constant and then Mr. Weddleton. Mr. Constant?
Hi there. I'm not sure if this is a question for you, Mr. Roth, or Ms. Acton. She's here. She's our transportation director. And I'm curious if the school district had conversations with municipal transportation about the possibility of working together. Shared service, this might be a perfect example.
Through the chair. So the district has had communications with People Mover, Ms. Acton, but this is specific to the provision of transportation support to ASD students. Now, in terms of addressing this specific matter, again, our limitation is on drivers. I'm understanding that People Mover is also constrained on a number of drivers, and that the routes that People Mover runs are generally very specific to a route, and I think the limit is a number of like 16 routes, whereas the district, we're running over 200 routes. So I don't believe, frankly, that People Mover would be in a position to modify existing routes to accommodate what is kind of a moving target with regards to these cohorts.
Just a quick follow-up.
Go ahead.
I don't think I would consider asking them about altering current routes, but maybe drivers and the smaller buses and some alternatives. But I recognize People Mover probably shares the same functional problem as ASD, but I would hope that there's a conversation ongoing about ways to be flexible between the two bodies to make sure our kids are getting to school. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Next, we have Mr. Weddleton and then Ms. Kennedy.
All right, thanks. And, I'm sympathetic. I mean, many of us face tough choices because we don't have the employees we need. So I think there's no good solution. But it does seem like, if you have an area that has no sidewalks, no place to walk, and is designated by the school district as, even though it's within a mile of a school, as unsafe for walking, that should be factored in. I just, even given ridership, I mean, we heard from one speaker here, but that's across, I think, Eagle River and across the hillside. They're not allowed to walk. So if you're not allowed to walk and there's no bus, well, you're kind of in a pickle. And to require parents to have to drive in those cases, it may have to happen, but it seems like the walking safety should be a criteria. And a lot of the Title I schools are within areas that do have sidewalks and so on. I don't see the relevance of a Title I school being unsafe for walking. That should be the critical factor. Is it safe to walk or bike to school?
Oh, go ahead.
Through the chair and just understanding safety. So walking on a road is safe, but there's also other critical factors in schools about student safety. And the data represent from our title schools about other areas of safety for which we should be highly concerned. Therefore, it was imperative that we prioritize for that equity sake of personal safety to ensure that we're getting education, getting the other services necessary, such as lunches and things like that. A few of our title schools that may have had lower ridership are CEP schools where we feed children every day. And so title has more factors than just a walkability in the bigger picture of items. So I think you were referencing this should be above this and this. So I just wanted to provide just a different picture of some of the other safety features for which we would consider.
Sure.
So what are those other safety features?
Feeding students with lunch, students being unattended, parents not being home. ability to go to school or not, having really socioeconomic factors that would make it more difficult in affecting certain students over others. Having a meal.
So I guess is the point that being lower income means it's harder for you to walk to school?
No, I'm saying that there's additional safety concerns other than walking that were considered in this decision-making process.
But my kid can't get to school because you suspended the route.
Thank you.
But what are those safety factors? I mean, so lunch, but they can walk to school and get lunch. So I mean, what am I missing?
Many can't walk to school. So these are bus routes with high ridership, low ridership, things like that. So it's not just about walking to school or not walking to school. It's about getting kids to school, ensuring they're there.
Anything else, Mr. Weddleton?
I guess it has the same, Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Next, we have Ms. Kennedy and then Ms. Zalatel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I have a couple of questions. First, you're talking about this being a moving target. I understand right now you have plans out till like November, and you've notified parents in certain areas and bus routes about potentially they could be in that group of having no transportation later on in the fall months. If that's a moving target, is there potential that that won't happen, that things could get normal again in a matter of weeks, or is the idea of having bus drivers hired, prepared, trained, all that, do you see that actually going that far for sure, or you're just kind of still looking at everything on a weekly basis, daily basis? How's that actually playing out?
Through the chair, that's a great question. So we believe, just based on the numbers of applicants who are currently in training to receive a commercial driver's license, that all things being equal, again, part of the impact here and what drove what was a fairly short-term decision for the first cohort is when we lost 8 drivers due to COVID. That based on the numbers of drivers that we are accessing that we, by mid-October, believe we'll have enough drivers that we can suspend this program. And I mean, hope not being a method, but we are hopeful based on that criteria that we will have enough drivers to resume all the routes that we are supporting. So thank you for that question.
Thank you, that helps. Another question?
Go ahead, Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you. My other question is in regard to, can students, or parents, I guess, take students to other bus stops that are still active and take advantage of transportation that way?
Through the chair, absolutely.
Okay. And one more, it might be a quick one.
Go ahead,
Thank you.
Ms. Kennedy.
How is this impacting your attendance policies then? What are you doing with the expectation of students that, for whatever reason, decide they just can't get to school without some kind of transportation? How is that affecting your attendance policy?
So thank you. That's a great question through the chair. We are taking a look at that. We have not had a great deal of non-attendees because of this. I think our parents see it as a small amount. Those that initially showed up, not being able to, the schools are troubleshooting them individually because they're not a large, it's not a large event. It's, because we picked the lower ridership. So I can have a detailed report of that, but again, I just want to be very, very realistic with the entire assembly that we're holding schools together with a shoestring during this time with the amount of cases, and kids are often absent for lots of reasons. Sometimes our parents are sick and they can't get them up to get to the buses that we do have and things like that. So I can certainly report on that, but our buildings were sharing with us that although it's not real, I mean, it's just not a good thing. It's just the best of the worst, and that they're working with their families, but they seem to be getting, initial response was, yeah, we're getting the kids to school, but I have not had the data driven down for that, but we can do that report for the assembly and the school district.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Thank you, Dr. Bishop. And Ms. Zelatel has taken herself out of the queue. I just want to point out that we do have 3 microphones, and we'll need to just pass them around to make sure folks on the line can hear. Is there anyone else who would like to get into the queue who has a question? Mr. Dunbar?
So one of my employers has, because they don't want a lot of absences, has mandated we get vaccines. And I'm wondering what, if any, policy there is with vaccines regards to school bus drivers. We think that will reduce the number of sicknesses and absences. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Through the chair to Member Dunbar, we are in discussions in regard to in the district. It is apparent that workforce is being affected by illnesses through COVID. So we are exploring vaccination as well as testing for those that cannot be vaccinated at this time, but don't have any finalized reports on that or recommendations to the board now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Anyone else? Okay, we'll go ahead and move on then to item B, overview of adopted goals, guardrails, and interims. And that one is also ASD presenting.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and hopefully this will be a good thing. The board president asked me to just present some information, and I'm just, in light of just the busyness, I pulled what I had done at a recent, chamber Rotary meeting. So I just wanted to, so I grabbed it and we're just going to present to you. It is exciting. There still is a focus. So we welcome back the folks this year, new year, and it's the 4th week. Just wanted to share that into the new school year with our new board goals and guardrails with the board. So the biggest question in the room at this time was, and maybe in this one too, about the mitigation. If anyone requests from the assembly, what's going on in school and what are they doing here and there, we do have operational guidelines, very simplistic, one page. This is narrowed down from the beginning of the pandemic where we had pages and pages because everything had to be rethought. But again, as the science comes in, when you know more or know better, you do better. And so we're just trying to do better in our schools and keeping them open. So that out of the way, want to let you know we're in school for, this is the close of the 4th week. And one of our mitigation measures is, again, wearing masks, and it's working. I want to share that I'm on a call every week with the other 5 large school districts, and our percent COVID in children and adults is very minor compared to the size of our other districts that don't have universal masking. So that's a plus for us. We're keeping them open and moving forward. So our mission remains the same, educating all students for success in life. And you might ask, so how are we going to do that in designing the new board, the board's goals and guardrails? As you know, Destination 2020, especially those that were on the board, of you that were on the board that created Destination 2020, 2020 passed, and we moved on. We started in 2019, the board with phase 1 engagement, phase 2, 3. We shared this prior, maybe about a year ago with you. We've had starts and stops due to the pandemic, moved from in-person to online, back to in-person, things like that to engage with our community. But now I just want to share what we've rested on and the board has voted on for moving forward in strategy 26. The input, though, just so you know, wasn't just the board dreaming up something or administration. It actually engaged the community as that flow chart demonstrated. And we just want to say, what might success look like to you if you, as our whole community, are owners of the school system, the public school system, what does it look like? And so we received back information from our community as well as our kids. So one of the funny things from students was, I want to learn adulting. They wanted, and when we drilled that down, believe it or not, our kids said financial literacy was, they didn't say it that way, but they wanted to know checkbooks and things like that. So it was fun engagement.
We tallied up the responses, they were open-ended, we coded them, and here they are. So moving with that, some of the things that were anecdotally said, providing for the family, doing what you love, again, being able to be happy, healthy, contributing families in our community was key to when they leave ASD, that's what they like. This one is another one, kids need to graduate with skills necessary to hold down a job and be productive. This kind of moved the board, so you know, from graduation, and United Way really questioned, like, we used to always count graduation, and of course we did, but that should be our floor, not our ceiling. Graduation is, and they even call it commencement, your beginning the rest of your life to be that adulting. And so I'm really proud to talk about as well the college career and life readiness items that we're going to track in kids and try to engage them as well with our new goals. We also looked at student data, and there's no secret here. We've heard it that we need to improve our student outcomes. And we understand and understanding that no one is going to save our children but us. We are the ones who have to do the work, who have to have the focus, and have to ensure our system is aligned to support all students. So here it is, strategy 26, fueling our future, and there was kind of a fun kind of play with this, that it does entail the foundational skills and knowledge of early learning to be able to fuel our future with our college career and life ready. So strategy is written in cursive on purpose and Roman numerals on purpose to get those core understanding of fundamental skills in there. So here are the 3 primary goals. And when we talk about goals, we have had some feedback, well, if you're doing these goals, you're not doing anything else. And as anyone who runs a business or works in other entities, you have focus points, things that you're going to rally around, but all the other work still happens. And so reading proficiency, we seek to have our 3rd graders reading on grade level by 2026, 80% of them. And so this is a goal that we've had for reading proficiency, but we've actually narrowed all the other things we do to ensure that that basis is there. The Assembly might like to know, and one of the good things that happened during the pandemic is that what they call the reading wars and in research really ended with the preponderance of evidence, and actually Columbia University pulling off of whole language, their support. They had their primary person, Lucy Calkins, who taught for them, had what was called balanced literacy. The difference was, do we teach kids sounds and letters, or do we teach them skills to look around the page to figure it out? And they have said all the evidence points back to probably how we learn phonemic awareness and phonics actually matter. So that in our primary learners for K through 2, that was an essential curriculum. So we are really focusing back on that. Math proficiency as well. We have a lot of growth to make. We adopted a new math curriculum. And again, the improvement is 15%, and we look to improve more, but we knew that for elementary teachers doing the foundational things, a lot of times reading comes before math, because reading is the gatekeeper for all other learning. We learn to read, to learn. And then finally, college, career and life ready. It begins with the freshman class, and we're really looking at not only graduation, but also what are the experiences in our high schools that matter most. This is research around Gallup, research around redefining success. Those are evidence-based research documents, meta-analysis of when we study people who are successful, what are those experiences they had when they were young, and looking at them in high school. Career technical education experiences. Even if I'm going to college, having a career technical course. Involvement in activities. We might think, oh, that's crazy, sports and all that stuff, that's just extra, but interestingly enough, those are the type of activities that really provide those employability skills that kids need. You're working with a team, you're getting direct feedback on what you can and can't do, taught how to improve it, and you do it because you love what you do. Sometimes we struggle with that in a reading class or a writing class, because the teacher might just not like me, but for some reason coaches have a way. So it's that bigger coaching model that we learn from the things we're engaged in. One of the other items is
there is a direct relation to success in post-secondary with at least taking an Algebra 2 class. And so many of our math classes in high school, our graduation requirements were based around a math class, at least algebra, but it could be defined many ways. And we're really trying to redirect to have quality, high quality teaching in certain courses that we know matter later on. So those are just a few things. It's also employability skills. It's also having a career readiness, work done in middle school as well. Lots of things. We're putting that together, but reporting on that to say we do more than just finish and graduation and try to get a kid through. We're trying to have the experiences that are going to matter when they leave us. So in all of that, the board and the administration, our goal right now is the main thing is to keep the main thing and really focus on student academic outcomes. And although schools are designed for supporting kids in many ways, primary goal of public education is advance the academic success of students so that they can and will provide, grow up and be able to have a happy, healthy life and provide for themselves and their families. With that, there's also guardrails, and this is a kind of a new terminology. And these are, if goals are the vision of the community, guardrails then become the value. In the feedback from the community, what the discussions were about, their values, the board came up with these 4 items, and they're written in thou shalt not. In reaching those goals, the superintendent shall not do these things. And those are, leaving student groups underrepresented in lottery application. It's more back to, having all kids represented, teaching all kids, not operating without a plan to develop a diverse or culturally responsive workforce, support in mental health services, as well as addressing unsatisfactory employee performance. So those were the values by our community that the board created these guardrails. And I'm just going to leave this, when we talk about the main thing is the main thing, this gentleman is actually a friend of mine. He works out of Texas. He trains in different businesses and stuff, but he has a short little clip that talks about the main thing, doing it with passion, and really knowing why we are here. And I wanted to share that the school district, while in a very, very difficult year, I shared earlier that we are doing everything we can to keep our schools open. We know that's important. Folks are working extremely hard, and we are keeping the main thing. We know why we're here, and we're doing it with passion. This takes 2 minutes, so make your heart feel good.
I think about this all the time. Why am I here? And it makes me think about what happened in the 1957 World Series. This is such a great story. Yogi Berra was the catcher for the Yankees, and Hank Aaron was playing for the Braves. And this is in the World Series. Yogi Berra talks smack all the time. And sure enough, Hank Aaron steps into the batter's box, and Yogi starts running his mouth at him. And his first comment is, hey, Henry, you're holding your bat upside down. You got the label facing down. All the stamps are facing down. You need to turn it with the stamps and the label facing up. And of course, Hank Aaron, being Hank Aaron's trying not to pay attention. The very next pitch, he hits it so deep into left field, it's completely out of the park. It's a home run. He runs around all of the bases, and when he steps on home plate, he turns to Yogi, and he kind of smiles, and he said, Yogi, I didn't show up here to read. I love that story. And the reason is he knew why he was there. When you get up in the morning, when you step up in the morning, when you step onto the campus, when you walk into the classroom, when you walk into your office, it doesn't matter what you're doing. Know why you're there. Know why you're stepping into that box. And for me, I'll tell you, that's the biggest driver in my life. I know why I'm here. I know what I'm up to. I know what I want to do. And I know how to do it. And so it makes it great fun for me. Here's a closing thought for you too. I see so many people fail, but it's not because of lack of talent. It's because of lack of purpose. And we have purpose. We have purpose. So let's live it with passion. Know why we get in the box, and let's get the hits.
No clapping.
Yeah, that's all right. Thank you very much, and that concludes the overview of the goals and guardrails.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. Mr. Constance?
Thanks. I just want to say the comment you made about the end of the language course. I love hearing that we settled on a path that's somewhere in between these two camps. And when I first moved
to Alaska, I came here from a job working with Linda Mood Bell. And they are founded in my hometown and did all of their studies and research on my friends. And I'm glad to hear that we're going back to some of the basic building blocks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Constance. Anyone else? Dr. Bishop and then Ms. Lessons.
I would just like to say that I am quite impressed that you know Linda Mood Bell. That's really good.
This is more of a comment for the record than a question. One of the best 10 minutes of my week last week were spent in a middle school math classroom. And that middle school teacher was rolling out the new math curriculum, which has students really thinking about, my understanding, thinking about how they're coming up with their answers. It's less direct instruction and more getting the students to understand deeply. And for 10 minutes, that teacher had the students working on the question, -9 minus 6. And that doesn't seem really exciting, but I am telling you, this master teacher had students eating out of the palm of his hand, engaged. You could hear the little gasps of the light bulb moments. You could hear that he was working the room. I just want you all to know that there is excellence in our schools, and I just wanted to share that.
And if there's time, I'll sing the ABC song. That would be a treat. President Bellamy. Thank you, Dr. Bishop, for that presentation, and thank you for all you're doing to keep our schools open and to keep learning moving forward. Okay, seeing no one else in the queue, that brings us to C, update to 21-22 mitigation plan, also an ASB presentation.
Thank you. We just wanted to, I briefly talked about the mitigation plan here. If there were any questions, we wanted to be able to answer them. I did want to share, we had a question about vaccination as well. We continue to do universal masking, just briefly. Some of our changes from the beginning of the year in regard to outdoor activities, students don't wear their masks and we are not close contact with our students. That's keeping them out of school. Our evidence, both in class and out, is that the close contacts that we send home to not have access to education are actually students that are playing and going places and everything. The safest place essentially is school, and so symptomatic students will be asked, to go home. We're providing testing for that. We could touch on that a little later, but close contacts of a positive case does not automatically send you to a quarantine situation. And wearing masks through the CDC supports that evidence as well. So that was a major change. But the goal is to keep more people in school.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. Mr. Perez-Verdia and then Ms. Kennedy.
Thanks. I don't have a microphone, but I'll just talk really loud. Yeah, just a clarification on the difference in what you were describing between students who are over the age of 12 and older and under, is that there's a different policy, correct, in terms of if you have contact to exposure, aren't children who are 12 and older able to come back to school and children that are younger not? Is that correct?
Through the chair, in regard to close contacts, or are you in regard to actual COVID positive? Exposure, so a close contact. For quarantine, we have adjusted since the beginning of the year for all K-12 students, even though we understand that a vaccine is available for 12 and older. The CDC has specific K-12 guidelines that allow for universal masking does not, supports not quarantining students if they've been exposed. So if there's a case in a room
and where you have masks on, that's actually spelled out in the CDC, that they don't have to
If
have.
they're exposed outside of school, is that different? If there's a reported exposure outside of school?
Correct, and we just don't have the capacity to keep up with that. And so what we are doing is, if there are symptoms, we're asking to quarantine or to get a test to come back. If there are no symptoms in children, we would like them to come to school. And we're operating that way now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perez-Verdia. Ms. Kennedy, and then Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You were talking kind of about flexibility, and I don't know how well this is actually working. Seems like it's cutting in and out. So I'll talk loud. When you were talking about children being outside, they kind of have an option, but there are also opportunities, or there are, thank you, there are activities outside of the classroom as well that are not necessarily just kids being outside. And I'm talking about the extracurricular things, whether that be student government or clubs or whatever. And I noticed there was an interesting, I guess, difference in how Chugiak High School and Eagle River High School were handling homecoming. And if I'm correct, Eagle River was having a dance, but Chugiak High School decided to do a drive-in movie theater, which I guess was last night. I haven't heard how successful that was, but I thought it was pretty creative and very, very clever. So anyway, what kind of restrictions or flexibility is really going on with those kind of after-school activities in terms of mitigating?
Sure, thank you. Through the chair to Assembly Member Kennedy, I just wanted to share that we have guidance, which is standardization. And I want to be clear that from the beginning of the year, we've moved to more flexibility because of the evidence that's coming out that really having school is a good thing for kids. As far as after-school activities, we have left it that if the mitigation can be completed, and in a safe way, that our schools can have their activities. Then what it comes down to is, do we have the workforce to be able to come in, the volunteers needed for a lot of those activities to come in, even paid volunteers, or so I guess they wouldn't be volunteers, but paid people to come in. It really then drills down to, as a school, how are we going to do this next operation? And can we do it? What are the number of kids who are going to be involved? Do we have staffing for that? So there's a good deal of flexibility given the expectations of doing our best for mitigation. Okay. And so a lot of times, what a lot of schools did is leave it up to their kids. What do you want to do here, there? I think Kirsten Johnson she can talk a little bit about it if you'd like for more detail. She's the Senior Director of Secondary. Good.
So through the chair to Member Kennedy, I think the superintendent explained it really well. We actually met with all of our large high school principals prior to the school year even taking place and starting to talk about homecoming specifically, because it was going to be essentially one of our first really large group gatherings as a school district with our kids. And so there was a collective decision amongst principals, given the mitigation guidelines, to do things outside as much as possible, especially in the fall while we could still do that. And that would give, especially because our rates of COVID transmission were rising at that time, and they continue to rise. And then, as the superintendent explained, staffing is always a consideration of what we're able to provide. And the superintendent is right. These activities are generally student driven. And so many of our student government kids are planning those events and working through what they would specifically like at their own school. So I think you explained it well, but it was a collective decision that each school would do their own kind of individual event and plan it to the best of their ability.
Thank you. I'll just say, I think it's great, the cleverness and kind of the adaptability that's going on is really nice. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Mr. Dunbar?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just so that the assembly can get a sense of the scale, could you let us know on average how many kids are quarantining on a given day? And what percentage of those quarantines are a result of a close contact with school versus community spread? And I think you sort of alluded to the fact that it's usually community spread, but do you have those kind of numerical breakdowns? And again, doesn't have to be today, but on a given day, what's the average?
Through the president, I guess you guys use president, right? Chair as well. Okay. Chair LaFrance to Assemblymember Dunbar. We have a COVID dashboard that we can share with you, but we don't have, it's very difficult for anyone to say where you had COVID and where it started. We have not had hotspots in different areas, but we don't really know where it's coming from. We don't have mass spread in our classroom. So if a person has it, we don't have, 10 kids around them have COVID. Therefore, that's the quarantine part. But our evidence, I'd have to really work through analyzing it. Is it easy to just pull up our dashboard to share?
It's all internal, so the ones that have the quarantine information, I need to create.
Case counts are public, but quarantining are ours because a lot of times it's just a choice and that's why we have it. But I would say on a given day, it used to be about 50, could have been up to 75 that we would ask to quarantine. Now, if they're symptomatic, they would have to get a test, even if it's a cough. We just don't know what it is. But if they're asymptomatic, we will not be mass quarantining kids. But it's about, but again, if 50 go on today, 50 might come off from 2 weeks ago.
Sure. That's actually a much lower number than I was expecting. Between 50 and 100, you have how many thousand kids in your school?
43,503.
But there could be, over a 10-day period though, there could be upwards of 500 kids, and 50 coming off. But now, if they are not sick and not showing symptoms, we're working with our parents to have them come to school because we're all masked.
And for kids that are 12 and over and could be vaccinated, is there any difference in policy for those kids that are vaccinated versus they're not vaccinated after a close contact?
There really aren't for students because the CDC just talks about masking, but as adults, vaccinated adults weren't close contacts, as you know, and we're masked anyway. So there are in the CDC regulations, but overlaying on that are K-12 CDC recommendations, which basically says vaccinated or not, if you're a child in K-12 in a universal masking situation, you can operate differently.
That's one last follow-up,
Sure,
Madam Chair. So I just want to make sure that I'm using kind of the right terminology. So am I using the wrong word when I say quarantine? Are there more students that are maybe being held out of class for one reason or another due to COVID exposure that aren't quote unquote quarantined, but are not in class?
That would be not exposure, but if they had COVID, that would be called isolation.
Okay.
So the student count, well, we have student and staff counts together, and I'd have to look up, I can do a report of like, what is the mean every day of reported positive cases, and those would be isolation. What happens with quarantining is if you were a close contact exposure, but now, again, through CDC, having masks and the evidence of there aren't hotspots, if you will, in schools, that we're keeping kids and notifying parents, but keeping kids and they can choose, do the best practice. Like, most parents want their kids to go to school.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Next, we have Mr. Perez-Verdilla and then Ms. Kennedy.
So I'm going to ask my same question again, just to make sure that I got it correct. If my child had exposure to COVID, but had no symptoms and tested negative, they should be in school. Is that correct?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
And
my daughter has been home for the last week because we thought we were following the guidelines of keeping her out of school, but she has no symptoms and she's negative. So that's what I'm personally frustrated, but I'm also
no, you should be frustrated.
confused
It's
because I
okay.
thought that was the
I want to say that's changing. It changed from the beginning of the year. So what the guidance was on Tuesday is very different than today. We are moving to using our course 4 weeks and best practices from CDC. They keep updating as well and giving new guidance. Students who have been exposed to a positive case, but in school who are not experiencing any symptoms are going to remain in school now.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I like that.
that's a new
I
change.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I just want to make sure everyone knows that.
Yeah.
If your child has been exposed but is negative and has no symptoms, get them to school.
Absolutely, and we are mass communicating that, and it started just with outdoor activities, now it's moving to indoor as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Perez-Padilla. Ms. Kennedy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for running the mic back and forth. I guess I just have a comment, and I was gonna say that I really appreciate the information that the district has on the website. And because on any given day, you can look and see exactly what classroom, well, not specifically what classroom, but you can find out whether or not a classroom in any given in any given school has a COVID issue. And I've checked it several times, just to kind of just get a sense of what's going on with students in the district. So I think it's been very helpful. And I've also noticed that it is incredibly up to date, because if I look on one day, the date might be the day before that a case was identified. So it's very responsive, and I really appreciate that. And it gives a little bit of detail too, to say, well, this class, maybe they've all gone to online learning or whatever. So it even tells you what actual mitigation has happened because of that particular case in that situation. So kudos.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, I might just add a little bit of information without disclosure. The only classrooms for which we've had to close were classrooms with students who had under 10 students in the class that had difficulty within the students of keeping their masks on. So without giving out too much information, they're very specialized classes that had to be shut down only.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Ms. Zelatel?
Fridia's clarification. So asymptomatic students, known exposure can remain at school. Does that require a negative COVID test, or it is irrespective of whether or not the student has taken a COVID test? And if you said as much, I apologize if I may not have heard. The phone's a little bit wonky. Thanks.
Through the chair to Member Zelatel. No, these are great questions. And as we learn more and get more information, and as we get new updates from the CDC, we can move in a direction of keeping more students in school. So it is being communicated today that if you had an exposure because there was a positive case in your class, but you do not have symptoms, but you would be considered a close contact, you may remain in school. The only time at this time that you would have to get a test before you remain in school is if you had symptoms. And so if you're a close contact of a positive case, parents in that class will be notified, but children can remain in the class as long as they're asymptomatic.
Wow. Oh, okay. Thank you for that clarification. I guess I would love to learn more about that rationale, because we know kids can spread COVID pretty quickly, even if they're asymptomatic, and could bring it home to someone. And ASU does have a robust testing program, so I'm actually really surprised by that response and not requiring a test. Is there a particular rationale?
Yes, actually, it's being found more and more with the data that having the routines in school is actually a place, because when we quarantine students, and this is happening across the country, there used to be a time that when there was a hunker down, everybody really hunkered down. Quarantine does not mean you're not doing anything. Our kids are playing with each other and they're playing games and being interactive because they're not sick. It's very difficult to hold an unsick child in. And so given the information, along with some evidence we've had from some of our parents who actually may have been a close contact at their work or have COVID, the inability to really isolate at home
is also a factor. So schools being the safest, one of the safest places with routine that supports learning is really the rationale that the benefit of having children in school are much greater than that potential, spread, if you will, given that we're not in any kind of a stay at home. Children's routines at school are more beneficial and their learning than quarantining them when they're not sick.
But Madam Chair, if I may follow up, because I didn't really answer my question. I'm not concerned about quarantining. That's not what I was asking. I was asking what's the rationale for not requiring a test? Because test results come back quite quickly right now, 24 hours in most cases. And so that's my concern.
Yeah, actually, that's not what we're experiencing. We are experiencing, even with our employees, 3 to 4 days because of the high volume right now in the community. If we had an ability, in some of our schools, we have Avid ID Now. We have 26 of those. So in certain schools, we can find out in 20 minutes if there was a concern by a family member, but that's not ubiquitous across the whole district because we have nearly 100 schools. That's why we're increasing testing in our high schools for our staff and students because the turnaround time is actually 72 hours now, which continues to keep students out of school and adults away from work.
Okay, I appreciate the clarification. I would hope that we can maybe connect the ASD with, we heard from Dr. Hennessy that there's some really rapid testing resources available for the state of Alaska now, and that we could deploy those because I am concerned about asymptomatic spread if tests are not required, particularly where we have a known close contact a known exposure. So I'd be happy to try to help make some connections on that. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Dr. Bishop.
Thank you, Ms. Alatel. Thank you, Dr. Bishop. And I just want to point out too that the next item on our agenda addresses asymptomatic testing plan. We'll go to.
I'll wait for that.
Oh, you want to wait, Ms.
Yeah,
Aller?
I didn't, we were kind of going in between C and D, so I'll wait till C.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Allard. Let's see if there are any other comments on C, update to the mitigation plan. Then we'll go ahead and move on to asymptomatic testing plan. I'm not sure who wanted to kick off this part of the discussion, if that was yours, Dr. Bishop, or if we want to just start with Ms. Allard's question.
Through the chair, this was not ours.
Okay.
And just to put it on record, the school district capacity to do asymptomatic testing is about 0 right now with all that we're doing. And additionally, my understanding from the evidence is that with a community spread as high as we are, that asymptomatic testing is not of value right now to school districts. We barely can keep up with symptomatic testing. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. We'll go to Ms. Allard, but I do want to ask, was there someone who had requested this as an agenda item? Ms. Allard?
Thank you. I agree, and I think one of the things that we needed to discuss with the asymptomatic, because I know Ms. Solital had some concerns about it, is the false positives that can come up and it ends up labeling the kids and then they're out of school, then they might want to take another test, and then before you know it, the parents are at work and everybody's at home. And that's a concern because if they're not in a routine, it does affect the kids. And you're correct, I mean, I gotta be honest, I know people, and I wouldn't say I wouldn't be one of them if my child's asymptomatic, and I know that. And they don't have to be quarantined per se. We're going out of town, we're gonna go do things. So to keep the kids in school is a better option on that. Not to mention that the surveillance testing, I would be worried about it on a legal standpoint. Because when you open up for kids to be tested if they're asymptomatic or no symptoms, you're gonna have to open the door for other testing, which we don't do drug testing at school. We don't do STD testing at school. And to test kids just because you think they might be isn't the route to go. So thank you for kind of, with the asymptomatic, a little bit shutting that down.
Thank you, Ms. Allard. Any further comments on this item? Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Thank you. I just wanted to echo the comments Ms. Salatel made. We know that the best way to keep kids in school and to keep everyone doing what they're doing and working is to keep doing testing if we have exposure. So I hope if the school district can find the resources, I know it's a tough time, but to test asymptomatic that have a close contact, that would be really smart. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Quinn Davidson. Okay, seeing no other questions, comments, we will go ahead and move on to E, Youth Advisory Commission, Youth Assembly Representative, and Youth Mentorship Opportunities. And this is a discussion. Mr. Rivera.
Great, thanks. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I requested that this topic be added onto the agenda. I think as the members of the Assembly and the school board likely know, due to COVID, both the Youth Advisory Commission and the Youth Assembly Representative were on a bit of a hiatus. I think, though, we are at a stage where we are robustly looking to reinstate both of them. So getting new members on the Youth Advisory Commission, which I don't know exactly how many vacancies it has, but I think currently it has quite a few vacancies. And then getting a new Youth Assembly representative up on the dais. But for speaking for myself, you know, that's a priority of mine. I'd like to see if we can get those voices back in the mix. So I just wanted to raise that as a discussion point, see if there's anything that the school district could do to let students know, whether it's through organizations, student body organizations or otherwise, to let folks know, okay, you can apply now, and we're accepting applications. And then otherwise on the youth mentorship opportunities, back when the Youth Advisory Commission was meeting, this was a topic that they had brought up about wanting to tie in the members of the Youth Advisory Commission with mentorship opportunities. And so I just also wanted to bring that to this body because there might be some individuals here who might be interested in providing that mentorship for folks on the Youth Advisory Commission. So I just wanted to open that up for discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera. Dr. Bishop?
Yeah, through the chair to Assemblymember Rivera, Senior Director Kirsten Johnson is in the room, and she can certainly make a comment or just know that we will follow up. Yeah, but if you have any questions, Dr. Johnson is the secretary. If you have any questions, if not, we'll be sure to get this along. Oh, there is a question.
Mr. Constance?
Thank you. Would it be feasible for Mr. Rivera members to send a communication to the school district to send to the student government classes and kind of put out a recruitment? It would be great to be doing some outreach. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have a mic, but so through the chair, sorry, people on the phone probably can't hear me. Thank you. So through the chair, certainly that would be great. We have a number of student groups that we could advertise this opportunity to within the district. Student Advisory Board being probably the first one that I think of, our district-wide student government, and has members from each of our schools at the secondary level that are represented there. There's a number of others that we could also advertise the opportunity to. So I certainly think it's a great idea and a good opportunity for our kids.
Thank you. I'll just put myself in the queue to ask President Bellamy. You have had you've had steady participation from your student representative on the school board. Is that correct?
Yes, we do. We have one of our student advisory. I think it's a president or a representative, the board, or we have a student advisory board, and they meet with us during the school year. So we are expecting to have a brand new one actually real soon at our next meeting. And really, I think that's not just a great opportunity to hear youth voice, but it's also great to give youth the opportunity to be a part of the process. So we're making some changes actually this year to give it an even you know, more prominent presence and participation for our representatives.
Thank you, President Bellamy. I'd be curious to hear your recruitment strategies and, what kind of outreach to get
We got
students.
all the kids. Yeah. We got an advantage that way, but.
Maybe there's some synergy there.
We would have to, yeah, that would be great. He sounds great.
Mr. Peterson?
Get your steps in. Oh, we got it. We started.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And, maybe the way to reach out would be to reach out to the government teachers and have them make some sort of announcement that this position is available and they might have students that they feel would take advantage of this situation and would be better suited to do this than others and maybe encourage those people to get involved. Just an idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Any other comments? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to the two items that we added to the agenda. The first one, F, other future venues for joint meetings. Mr. Donnelly?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's occurred to me that it would be easier on the public if we had one established larger venue that we held these meetings in. We've been lucky, I think, from the point of view we haven't encountered a major problem yet, but it could happen very quickly. A lot of folks decided to show up at one of these and talk to us, and it would be very challenging to do so, and especially this forum. We have a little more room in the school district than you all have here, but it also, I find it's easier on the public if there's one place where they know that meeting's going to be. It really is challenging when you switch locations back and forth. It gets confusing. So I just wanted to raise the subject and see if other people shared that concern or had any ideas. I have no idea how difficult it is to utilize the assembly chambers for these kinds of meetings, what all that would involve, what the cost might be. But you all would be much more aware of that than we would be. So that's what I was looking for, that kind of comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Mr. Whittleton?
I agree with that. We can't spread out here too. And I think if we just, I have no trouble going to the school district meeting where they have an awesome sound system, beautiful tables, more room, and it's only 4 times a year. So I would very much support just doing it there for many reasons. The LUSAC's a possibility, but it's a little awkward too as far as this kind of forum. It could happen, but I think we get 90% of the way there doing it at the school district. It's like, or bring your sound system.
You guys bring the snacks.
Thank you, Mr. Whittleton. We'll go to Ms. Kennedy and then Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Sorry, I was just gonna say real quickly that, yeah, I agree. And I think you guys have the space, you have the technology, and you have the free parking. I'm paying for parking right now because there's not enough places for all of us to even park. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Ms. Quinn Davidson?
I just want to say thanks to Mr. Donnelly for raising it, and I agree, particularly for the public. I just want to make sure there's enough room, and I think Ms. Kennedy brings up a good point about parking. So we could, I think much like John, we could have it in the LUSAC sometimes, but it's easy enough just to go to the school board or the school building and you know where it is. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Quinn Davidson. And I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads, and I think general agreement that we want to look into a bigger, perhaps more convenient location for the public. Any other comments before we move on? Okay, this is something we will take up offline between the clerk's office and the school district and school board. Thank you all, and thank you, Mr. Donnelly, for bringing that up. Okay, the next item, report from the assembly regarding the bag ban, also raised by Mr. Donnelly and Mr. Rivera.
I'm happy to respond to a question, but I would like Mr. Donnelly to explain.
Understood.
one of the premises for the suspension of the bag ban was the volume of COVID cases that was occurring in the community. And it's actually increased from the point of time where the bag ban suspension occurred to now. So I was wondering what, I'm sorry I didn't get to watch your meeting where you actually discussed this, but I was really interested in the logic behind removing the suspension at this particular point in time.
Yeah, thanks. I'm happy to speak to that in general terms and then open it up to my colleagues to add. So the bag ban was suspended for two reasons, and I think one reason was definitely the bigger one, and then the second one was an unknown. So the bigger reason was supply chain issues. We did not know, or rather, there was supply chain issues, particularly with paper bags at the time, and retailers had difficulty getting paper bags. They didn't have difficulty getting plastic bags. So in order to assist retailers, the ban was lifted. And then, we looked at putting it back in place at some point in the future when hopefully there wasn't a supply chain issue. I think the second issue was a little bit of an unknown, and that was around the transmissibility of the virus on these different types of services, particularly comparing plastic to paper to reusable bags. And that was an unknown. We didn't know at the time last year. I don't remember, it was like April or May, whenever the mayor put that order out to lift the bag ban. And now since then, I think we've learned a lot more, and that hasn't, of the two concerns, that second one about the transmissibility isn't as much of a concern now as it was a year ago when we didn't know as much about the transmissibility of the virus when it comes to these services. I think my colleagues, though, can probably provide a little bit more detail on that.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera. We'll go to Mr. Constance and then Mr. Weddleton.
Yeah, two things, a little more specifically on the question of the timing. When the Assembly acted to address the temporary lifting of the ban, it picked a date specific when that ban would go away. So the action was 8 months ago. It wasn't this week or last week or anything. There was nothing that happened except the code was enforced. So that's what happened specifically on the bag ban. The decision was made a long, long time ago. The question is now coming before us on a proposal by the mayor. There are a number of amendments being proposed. And the question of transmissibility is very interesting. The National Institutes of Health demonstrated it's 4 times more likely that COVID will last for 48 hours on a plastic bag than on a paper bag or other surfaces. And so the science doesn't back the perspective of the ban for the purposes of catching COVID, but rather now the supply chain issues do continue. So that probably will be perhaps the conversation that we have coming up.
Thank you, Mr. Constance.
I don't think.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no one else in the queue, we will go ahead then and move on to 9, which is an announcement just of the schedule of upcoming joint meetings. Our next meeting is scheduled for December 10, 2021, 10 to 12 p.m. in the ASD Education Center.
Yeah. That's
Number 10, now we're on member comments. We'll go ahead and start with the phone. Ms. Zelatel, do you have any comments? Okay, we'll go ahead then and go to the room. Ms. Kennedy, would you like to start?
Thank you. Always appreciate these meetings.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Perez-Verdia. We'll go ahead and start with Mr. Perez-Verdia, and then we'll go to you, Ms. Kennedy.
Okay,
That's okay.
fine, thanks.
Mr. Perez-Verdia.
Sorry, thank you for the opportunity to just make some comments. I'm sorry I had to leave a little bit early. I had to do this in another meeting. But I just wanted to thank the school district for all the work that they're doing, and I really appreciated the presentation today, and I particularly appreciated the change in policy related to the children exposed to COVID. I think it's important that our kids are in school. So I just wanted to thank them for their time and the work that they're doing. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Perez-Garcia. Ms. Kennedy?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mike, thanks to the school board, just for the information. It's always good to just catch up with each other, so I appreciate all the information and you all just having these conversations with us. And I will say that I have some questions about the full functioning of Greening Middle School, but I'll take that offline and have a conversation with Mr. Rock in a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Thank you, Ms. Allard. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to thank the school board for all the information today and for keeping track of the changing policies that are coming out from the CDC. With the new variants, it seems like it's a moving target, and so it's almost a full-time job just to keep up with, what's changing from day to day, week to week. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Mr. Rivera?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I also want to echo thanks to the school district for keeping our schools open and for keeping our kids in school. That's really critical, really important, and it's harder to do than you think. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera.
I know it's all about the thank yous, but I do want to say that I appreciate the opportunity to meet with the assembly, to collaborate and to share the information, actually in both directions. So I appreciate these opportunities.
Thank you. Mr. Constance?
Thank you. Last week, President Bellamy and I had an opportunity to tour Eagle River Elementary School and Greening Elementary School or Middle School. And, those schools were just devastated from the earthquake in 2018. And the voters authorized a very large bond package to provide for the sustainability of those campuses and other schools. And I would want to say to ASD, you've done an amazing job with your stewardship of those dollars. Those campuses are beautiful and they appear like they're gonna last for the next 60 years. And that is a credit to you and your leadership and to the voters and the people of the municipality of Anchorage who demonstrated their full faith in the school district.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. President Bellamy?
Thank you. I always enjoy our time together, and so I just thank you guys for being open to not just having us present, but listening to us. And we will do the same, so thank you. And I still will sing the song, but at the end.
Thank you, President. Mr. Dunbar?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So to echo some of my colleagues, I want to say thank you for the incredibly hard work done by the administration, by the staff, by the school board, in the face of sometimes very intense and sometimes conflicting pressures. I think you are doing a very, very tough job, but it is absolutely critical that we keep our schools open and safe. One clarifying thing, just going back to Member Donnelly's question. So the ordinance to suspend the bag ban will be introduced this coming meeting. The public hearing is until the 28th. So that was when any amendments that might happen on the 28th public hearing. Last thing I want to say, thank you for the invite out to Eagle River Elementary School for the reopening. That was wonderful. And I just want to echo everything Mr. Constance said about the stewardship of the public faith and the public dollars that went into that bond proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Ms. Peterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Wanted to say thanks to the board, like many of my colleagues, and to Dr. Bishop. I think you've all been really courageous and you're doing what's right for kids in the face of just a lot of rudeness and disrespect for you and for science. So I just really appreciate you and your engagement in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davidson. Ms. Lessons?
Yeah, thank you very much. I have two thoughts. The first is I would encourage other members here to go visit our schools, sit down and talk with our principals. We're working very, very hard right now, as are all of the staff, from the front offices to the nurses, to the teachers, to the cafeteria workers. Take a day and follow and see what's happening in those schools, because I think that it will be a learning experience for any and all of you. And the second thing is I appreciated these appreciation of the improved transparency on the COVID dashboard. And I think that speaks well of the district's response to community concerns. And I would suggest that there is also interest in understanding the full scope of the number of students who are in quarantine right now because of the extent of COVID transmission at the municipal level. So I think that's another step that we could move forward on and improve transparency for everybody.
Thank you, Ms. Lessons. Mr. Weddleton?
Well, thanks, and I guess one more time, thank you for focusing on keeping the kids in school. And I know that's been really tough. Watching from afar, you guys are really hung in there. It's put up with a lot of grief. And I would notice, and it's very helpful having school board members go to community councils, because I've noticed more than in my previous years that more questions towards school board members than to assembly members. It hasn't always been that way. I don't know, Member Lessons with the two yesterday and did a very good job with the test. Questions were tough, they were appropriate. She did a great job answering them, and that's what people need. So I hope we'll continue with that.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Mr. Donnelly?
I just wanted to bring up the upcoming bond proposition that Member Constance referred to. It's, as you know, by state law, the school district's required to have a 6-year capital plan. The plan's been squishy. The general knowledge is that it gets changed a lot as events occur. And as in the proposal, and this particular board, 4 of the members of this board have never had the opportunity to vote on the correct 6-year plan. So I'm not speaking for the board here, but at the last vote on the 2020 bond plan, it was a 3-4 vote, very close vote, of whether or not to divide the earthquake repairs into a separate bond because of the controversy regarding, in particular, a change of longstanding board policy to focus on repair projects rather than building new schools. That policy had been in place for a long time, and under the argument that we needed to remove that formal policy to accommodate the earthquake funding, the board voted to do that. But then in the 6-year plan, 2 new schools were added. That's a total tear down of Inlet View with a full new school being replaced, and of also Avaloo, a complete tear down and a rebuilding of a new school. We're talking over $50 million here, and quite a bit more than that actually. And the money for the design for Inlet View was in the last bond proposition. I personally voted to separate it out from the earthquake money because I didn't think it was fair to lump those 2 things together. But it got lumped together, and I think a lot of voters, like myself, that would have opposed building a new school rather than doing a remodel, significant remodel, voted for it because we recognized the need for the earthquake repairs. So I think there is going to be controversy in the upcoming 2022 bond proposition because of that, because now the rubber hits the road and the funding in excess of $20 million is going to be on there for a new school. And the fact is, our attendance is down. We've got a lot of areas where the schools only have 70% occupancy. And I think it's going to be a real tough sell to the public to build a brand new school when we've got so many of our schools that have a lot of room in them right now. And also the fact is that this school has only made the criteria for being, quote, overpopulated because of 2 reasons. One's because the criteria was changed 3 years ago for determining that. And 2, because the district has allowed, I think, 60-some students to come to that school that don't live in that neighborhood. If it wasn't for those 60 students, this school currently would not be considered 100% occupied. So there's a lot of real substantive concerns with this existing 6-year plan and this upcoming bond proposition having a brand new school being built.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Dr. Bishop?
Thank you, and I loved how that started. I just wanted that there always is controversy and there's always change. And I assure you that I operate with students in mind as well as efficiencies and effectiveness. And as the CIP comes up, it is different than it has been in the past, and it will look at utilization of space very differently due to the number of students who have left, as well as investing in our community. And I love doing that. So more to come. It's exciting.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. Mr. Holloman?
Thank you. I do have one issue I wanted to bring up again. It was something that I started sort of personally And it's not something the board has voted on or they've really discussed with the superintendent. But back in 2013-14, prior to her coming on board, ASD had to suspend teaching swimming as an elective due to the high cost of municipal pools. We have to rent them from you. And we do rent them from you for swim teams, for some of our adaptive education classes with special ed students. So we're a pretty good customer, but the truth is having it as an elective for students to learn to swim it was the most expensive elective we had in the district. With tight funding, it simply pulled too much money away from academic areas for us to be able to afford it. The net result is poor kids don't learn to swim. My kid was always going to learn to swim. He was going to go to lakes, he was going to go to beaches. But for other kids, that's the only way they learn. We're in a state with an incredible amount of water surface, and we lose people every year. And if you read the papers or if you hear the stories, you know that we lose people stupidly. People fall in the water and drown that should be able to get to shore, or someone should be able to rescue. I don't see within the budgets that we have being able to return it as an elective, but we do have staff that are qualified to teach it. We have kids that would be willing to take it, and they would become a customer base for your pools into the future. They would become an employee base for kids that would take lifeguard training and be available to be hired to work in your pools. I would urge the assembly to look and see if they can find a way to make the barrier less significant to the district, or possibly at no cost to the district, simply as a public safety issue and a way to get more of our population able to swim, and after we've invested quite a bit of money in their education, keep them as productive citizens in society. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hollerman. Mr. Jacobs?
I just want to echo everyone's appreciation for everyone's time today, and did want to thank the Assembly for their past, current, and ongoing future evaluation as to how the Assembly might be able to support ASD's focus on keeping students safe in the classroom. And I did want to say that I know that our board really appreciates the administration's hard work and everything they're doing right now, and the tremendous stress they're under. So see you folks next time.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobs, and I'll also echo gratitude to the district and the board members for keeping schools open, especially during this very, very challenging period. My family is very grateful. And also I want to mention that tomorrow marks the 20-year anniversary, so to speak, since the historic events of 9/11. And I just wish you all a very peaceful day with your families and friends of remembrance and reflection. And with that, we will go ahead and move on to final audience participation. We have one other person signed up for phone to swim, not on the line. Okay, so that person is not on the line. May I get a show of hands? How many folks are here to speak? 2, okay. 3, 4, you see 3, okay, somewhere between 3 and 4. And just a reminder, if you already spoke at the beginning of the meeting, that you can't speak again at the end. So we'll go ahead and get started. If you would come forward, I'll bring the microphone up there. And if you, oh, thanks, Jennifer. If you would start by stating your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Kimberly. I'm a Anchorage resident of 2 decades. I also have a child in the Anchorage School District. And I heard from this meeting today, Dr. Bishop, your COO, talk about the lack of buses. We need to be doing better. Maybe at your salary of $250,000 annually, you can give up the pay increase that you have and give bonuses to bus drivers.
Ma'am, please no personal attacks. Please stay focused on the topic.
I'm just problem solving. Maybe if we gave bonuses to Foresight so they could hire bus drivers, and maybe planning ahead so there are backup plans. But we need to be doing better for our children. Also, When I see a coworker packing up her monitors to bring them to her car to work from home because her child was labeled as a close contact, and I heard the rules were changing and the CDC is constantly changing, but she has to work from home because her daughter was a close contact. We need the kids in school. They need to be learning. And you know what? The test scores for the children are subpar. They're below the national average, and we need to be doing better. That's nice, the World Series, 1957. In 1919, World Series, the White Sox, they threw the game. And MLB created the baseball commissioner because of that. Checks and balances. What I told my coworker is if they send your children home, pull them from the school district. Put them in Christian school, homeschool them, take them out of Anchorage School District. Buy a house in the valley, leave. And that's how we're going to show you. And all you are elected officials, and I see you, Mr. Weddleton, if I see you driving and your name is on the side of your car and your address, say hello, because I'm a member of the community. And Mr. Dunbar, having a vaccinated mandate, you're employed by the federal government. That is different. This is not the federal government. We, the people, will not stand. That's why we have who we have in office for the mayor. Thank you.
Thank you for your participation. Welcome.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Louis Imbriani, and I just want to put it out there that I am on leave on my own personal time, just in case anybody wants to try to report me to my employer again. But I am here on my own time, taking personal leave. I had question, comment, maybe recommendation. We need to speak in terms of words that we all understand, communication that we can all understand. And I know that there's a lot going on, CDC, transportation, everything about how or what constitutes a COVID case. But it seems that the Anchorage School District has pretty much said that if you are positive but asymptomatic, you can come to school. So is that a case of COVID? CDC would say yes, but is it? Is it going on the dashboard? That's a question that I have, because if it's a positive test, it's probably going on the state dashboard as a positive, but is it going on to the Anchorage School District as one? The other question that I have is, comes to Title I schools. I'm not super familiar with them. I did a little bit of digging, and I know that the transportation is specific to them. Is that because of the reasons that were stated, or there's something else going on, like funding, like the Every Student Succeed Act, where they have to provide transportation to Title I? That's just a question that came to mind. And if you're not familiar with what I do for work, I won't go into great detail, but I see people from all over the city of Anchorage, from every different economic spectrum. And they have issues: mental health, behavioral health, substance abuse, abusing their children, neglecting their children. It's not specific to these areas. It's everywhere. And the people who need the most help are the people in those affluent communities that don't want to ask because they don't want to be labeled. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you for your participation. Welcome.
Hi, Niall Sherwood Williams. Thank you to the members of the board and the assembly for coming to the meeting today. Thank you to the members of the community that showed up. I'm going to speak about a bunch of things today, so forgive me if I go a little fast. First, I would like to speak to potential open meetings violations that, through the chair and Madam President, occurred at the August 3rd meeting, 2021, at the Anchorage School District, where the superintendent of schools issued a medical device policy for all the students. Through the chair, she is not a licensed medical provider, nor are any of the individuals in the school district. And even if they were, it has to be on an individual, one-on-one basis with that individual's doctor and their parent. Next, I would like to speak to the use of electronic devices during today's meeting. I took pictures of 7 individuals on the assembly and the school board that are in this room, including through the chair, Ms. Austin-Quinn-Davidson, that are actively using their cellular telephone devices. Is the meeting really that boring? It's also violative of the Alaska Open Meetings Act. So Attorney General Trike Taylor, this message is to you. Please investigate the Anchorage School District for open meetings violations, and please void their activity at the August 3rd meeting. Next, I would like to say that you are holding the children of Anchorage hostage in a communist takeover. They are not pawns to be used on the devil's chessboard. Madam Superintendent, School Board, Madam Chair, and Assembly members, they are human beings that had the God-given right to breathe oxygen. And you have no right to force medical examinations up their nose, to shove a Q-tip, which could have a bioweapon. Another thing through the chair, Tom Roth, Chief Operations Officer, I would like to ask the question. I would like to ask the question, what disinfecting and cleaning products, Madam Chair, are being used in the school district in the HVAC systems? Exactly what types, what brands, what names? Next, I would like to read from Article 7, Section 1 of the Alaska State Constitution. It gives you the right to public education. The legislature shall by law establish and maintain a system of public schools, listen, open to all children of the state. Excuse me.
Yeah, he's.
25 seconds.
Okay, also violative of the open meetings to be having cross conversations that aren't on the record. Another thing, people need to speak clearly into the mic. This is a public meeting and it's a public record, what's posted on YouTube. So to destroy public record of Anchorage School District meetings is a felony. Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public here who would like to participate? Because we have one more person actually who is on the line. Let's go to the phone. I believe we have Janelle Jones.
Ms. Jones, are you on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
Go ahead, please. You'll have 3 minutes.
Ms. Jones, you may go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I would like to say thank you to the Assembly for allowing me to speak. My name is Janelle Jones, resident of East Anchorage. I am going to provide testimony to the truth of what is taking place in our world right here and now. This is the human condition, whether anyone has recognized it or not, or accepted it or not. The human condition is slavery. Big Pharma has and never will have humanity's best interest in mind. Our generation needs to be taught and considered that just because any human being in a position of authority persuades you to get vaccinated for any reason doesn't mean it's safe. Masks restrict your oxygen, which is essential for child development. And to prevent disease, we need to create a healthy, strong immune system based on organic nutrition, not by poisonous vaccines, and masks do not protect. Governments are using COVID to lay claim to our children. If you are not talking about natural law, you do not know what law really is and how it applies to intelligent beings. The whole goal of true spirituality is the ending of the human condition called slavery. It's completely immoral, and people who continue to perform the actions that hold the human condition in this state or support and condone those actions are immoral people. The only solution to human slavery is found in consciousness expansion and evolution and the understanding and alignment to natural law. I can say with honesty and confidence that the majority of adults are failing at trying to teach our children true morality, the actual real definitive and objective difference between right versus wrong. And only by Jesus Christ can we escape from the abyss. Only Jesus Christ can save you. He wants to protect you from the spirit demons, from the kings of the underworld, who are the false god of the Old Testament, who all the churches and cabal agents worship and take orders from. He wants to teach you how to get on the way and stay on the way and not falling off from beginning to end. And spiritual teachers who are not exposing the control system and speaking about morality and the objective difference between right and wrong are frauds. Satan uses his loyal puppets in government, religion, medicine, and media to fulfill his new world order. Because he is the truth of the matter, folks. Government, religion, scientists, doctors, and even media are not the arbiters of truth, and their conclusions cannot be violently pushed upon our children. This is called worldview violence, which is going to lead to physical violence and lead to the stripping away of human rights, and we cannot allow that to happen. I stand against all forms of violence, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Good day.
Thank you for your participation. That brings us to the end of final audience participation. Thank you all for being here today. I apologize if we had some technical issues. Is there a motion to adjourn? We are adjourned.